This is one next special edition of Just Candid series. We don't need an introduction for the personality who's with us. I think we'll talk with her and understand who she is, what has she done for the society, what compelling work she has done, how she has transformed human lives for a better world. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues and our world outside, let's welcome Maja Daruwala. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you, Mr. Walia. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you at Chitkara University. Among this, I would say, a very august gathering of wonderful students we have today with us and their professors.
Well, with that introduction, I am sure to disappoint.
No, we are very honored and touched. Thank you very much.
What
a legacy you carry. But before that, I would like to ask you that what made you join the law school, and that also after marriage?
Right. You want the long story or the short story?
We are happy. We have a lot of time.
Okay. So I was living in Singapore.
Yeah.
And in Singapore, my husband was working and I didn't have any work. I didn't have any job, but I had 2 children. And I also didn't have any education. I had got married 2 years after doing what you would now call the +2. And suddenly I found myself unable to even apply for a job because everybody else was much more educated than I. But I did know that I was restless and also that I would have a modicum of intelligence, general knowledge and so on, but nowhere to go with it. I applied for doing my A-levels and I was so unexposed that I didn't even know that I was supposed to do my A-levels in 2 years.
Oh, that's how it was.
Yeah, so I did it in 1 without realizing that you've got 2 years.
Yeah.
And then when I got my results, I went to the window in Singapore to collect it from the Department of Education. And there was a little Tamil man sitting there. And he said, "What is the next thing you're going to do?" So I said, "Nothing. I've done my A-levels, now what to do?" So he said, "Are you stupid or what? You now apply for either economics or English or law."
Right.
So I said, "Okay, then shall I apply for, I can't do economics, so shall I apply for English?" He said, "You want to be a teacher?" I said, "No." So he said, "Do you want a profession?" I said, "Yes." So he said, "Apply for law." I said, "You sure, law?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes, apply for law." And he made me pay the fee and he made me fill in the papers.
Yeah.
And he said, "Now don't go home without going to Maxwell House, which is the place where you get second-hand law books."
Okay.
And so I went there and there were all these law books in stacks ready for the first year, second year, third year.
The very same
without going home.
And he's a stranger.
Complete stranger.
And a God-sent inspiration.
Truly, truly he was, because when I went home with this many books and my husband came home, he was a flight engineer. So he came home and he said to me, "What are these books?" I said, "I'm going to do law." He said, "Tu pagal ho gayi hai?" I said, "No, I'm going to do law." And he said, "Okay." And that's exactly how I did law. But the first time I opened a law book, there was a case in criminal law called The Queen versus Collins. And I read it and I thought, this is my calling. Because everything that had lain in my unformed mind about truth, justice, injustice, discrimination, equality, everything was in those first 10 pages. And I thought, this is what I want to do.
So that was a moment beyond jesting. Now something serious has come your way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so for the next 3 years, I I got a teaching job, a part-time teaching job, because at that time Singapore was transitioning from being Chinese and Malay in Bhasha to English. They wanted to dominate with English.
Correct.
And so anybody who spoke a modicum of English was in demand.
Right.
So I used to teach one semester, the semester which didn't have an exam, and then the next semester I would study and do the exam.
So restless then, restless still?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And enthusiastic
Absolutely.
then and enthusiastic now.
Yeah. So I think it's a very clear message that the child in you should be always curious.
And not as dumb as me. I think that also.
Definitely, you don't seem, that's your humility. You studied in Sanar, right? One of the early students of Sanar in the Himalayas, right? Very next to us. And how was the experience studying in that school at that time?
Well, it was essentially, everybody told me it was a school that the children of military officers went to.
Yeah.
And in fact, the history of Sanar is that it was created, there were 3 schools.
Right.
One was Lawrence, one was a place called Gora Gali, which then I think is in Pakistan. And then there was the one in Simla.
Right.
So the children of what we would now call JCOs and NCOs, they went to these schools because their children couldn't go to England. You know, they couldn't go back home. So that was it. And so these kids, sergeants and people like that, they went to these schools,
Correct.
which also kept them away from the natives, so to speak. And our famous alumni, now there must be so many, was Rudyard Kipling for a few years.
Top writer, one of the top writers.
So that's, I mean, I'm telling you the history, but I don't think that's why we went there. We went there because this was a transferable job, and at some stage you had to get an education. So I was about 14 and went there. And the boys' school, girls' school, but it wasn't kind of co-ed in the way that we think of it now. Everybody was kept right apart. And we would meet at assembly and stuff like that. There was a lot of counseling given to the boys about what they could do, and there would be people who would come, but never for the girls.
Why so?
It was that time.
They were so very much inherently wise all the time.
I like to think that they were inherently wise, but I suspect it was, अच्छा, तुम अच्छा सा एजुकेशन लो, अंग्रेजी बहुत अच्छी बोलती हो, अब या तो तुम कॉलेज जाओ या तो तुम शादी कर लो. You know, so there was not any great aspiration that we should all be astronauts and engineers.
Right.
Not at all. और law की तो बात ही नहीं थी.
So coming back to Singapore, the law completed, you went to England for your education too.
As an external student of the University of London, there were no great expectations of you.
Right.
And there was also a little bit of disdain that, oh, you're an external student. But there were about 10 of us who were external students, each of them studying in working or studying or something. But we were so motivated that the young professors and teachers of Singapore University used to teach us at night. And they used to love teaching us because from 7 to 11, we were the most committed. And as a result, we would give our exams, and they were very strict exams, and no concession was made. There was no drop in standard or anything like that.
Yes, and
absolutely.
Complete honesty.
Oh, totally. Totally. In Singapore, there's no question of that kind of thing. And so I got my law degree. I remember getting the telegram that said that I had passed and that I had passed well.
Yeah.
And I looked up from that telegram and I told my husband, I said, I'm going to England. I'm going to do 1 year of becoming a barrister. And he said, but how will you go? You've got 2 children. You've got a running household. I said, I don't know how I'll go, what I'll do, but I will go. And once I said that, everybody settled into it. And I talked to my father and mother, and my mother said, you leave your younger child with me, and the elder one who was 11, you take him and you put him into boarding school there. Luckily for me, we had I would say the advantage. We weren't particularly well off or anything, but my husband was in the airlines, so we could fly back and forth.
Yeah, transportation was not
nothing,
an issue,
you know, 10% or 5% or something like that. So I could go to England for short courses, and once I opted for my barristers, then I had a cousin who was living there. My husband's nephew was living there. So I lived with him, and I went to Lincoln's, and I did my school of, it was called the Council of Legal Education.
Right.
And you got your barristers, you ate your dinners, and you did 6 months of pupillage. And then you, of course, being England, you weren't allowed to work.
Right.
So you
In
had to
those
come
days,
back.
yes. Yeah, you had to come
You
back.
came back.
For
Horrible.
those who don't know, ma'am is one of the initial barristers of our country, who's done, I would say the human rights lawyer. That would be the right apt word. So I think we can cheer up for her.
Actually, I would love to say yes.
Yes.
But I would love to say yes, but it's not true. Because the barristers in those days, the people who came before me, like much before me,
Yeah.
like Mr. Gandhi, like Mr. Nehru, etc., they were all barristers. They were all barristers. By the time I came back to India, because I was expecting to go back to Singapore,
Yeah.
almost the night before, the night of my results coming out, and I had done all my subjects for Singapore. Shipping law, insurance, cargo, sale of goods, admiralty law. My husband told me, no, now we're transferring to Sri Lanka. He moved to Sri Lanka, and the result of that Sri Lanka thing was, that was actually where I fell in with a bunch of lawyers who were constitutionalists and human rights lawyers, civil liberties, governance, all of those things. And that's where one found one's inspiration, honestly. It was a long journey.
Right.
It wasn't as if I woke up one morning and said, I am Gandhiji. Not at all. And certainly I never have been. I'm extremely ordinary.
And which year or which was the moment when you felt, I know you shared something, but when you felt now is it that I'm going to take it on and, make a difference in the society, fight for the people in a way?
Those are lovely sentences. But the reality is that you just peg away at something. And you keep on at it and you persevere at it. You fail a lot of the time.
Yeah.
When I left Sri Lanka, which was after 6 years, and there I didn't have a law practice. I had a table practice with these people who were amazing, wonderful people. And he was one of the top constitutional lawyers in Sri Lanka at that time. And when I came back, I wanted to join a law practice that did public interest law, but it didn't work out. So I was a sort of independent practitioner, honestly, flailing around, hoping to do better.
Right.
And then I left and I did table practice, transactional law, contracts, leases. I was in-house lawyer for a couple of good companies. Then I left and got a job as the program officer for social justice for India and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Pakistan at the Ford Foundation.
Right.
And there one could learn.
There must be immense learning in that.
Immense
organization.
learning.
Yeah.
And you were kind of like sitting on top of a mountain because you could see the whole landscape below.
Right.
And you were expected to know the whole landscape
Right.
below. So you learned about civil society, you learned about NGOs, you learned about philanthropy,
Yes.
you learned about who was funding, where they were funding,
Yes.
what you could do to assist
yeah.
people, and not direct them, but give your support to people who were already doing good.
Right. And then have a better impact.
Have a better impact, and
Yeah.
so much. I was so honored to be able to help.
So you agree that, sense of freedom to execute is
Absolutely.
very important for even today's youth, students all around, not only our students at the university, but that sense of freedom and that authority to take decisions.
Yes, but also with that, I would say a singular fundamental thing that you need is to be in good company. And I really mean that word, good company. Ethical, with some idea about what you want to do, with some idea, with immense awareness of the world, experience of the world.
Yeah, you are aware to the society.
I would say knowing where are you located in society. Someone like me, if I were to say that I'm going to assist people in Orissa, would be just foolish because I can't speak the language, I don't know the culture so well, etc. As you grow, you know those things. But you come with certain advantages.
Right.
You can speak English well, you can read and write well, you can speak Hindi, you've grown up in a certain milieu. How do you maximize the possibility of that?
You appear to be a person who manifests it very strongly.
I think to be able to communicate, you're lucky, but it's not the be all and the end all. What you have to have, and maybe some, I don't have the traits that I'm talking about, but I'm talking about the traits that will perhaps help to be a social justice advocate.
Right.
And one of them is to have simpatico, to have empathy. And I think that word, empathy, is less used today than before. We all seem to be in deep conflict with identity,
Yes.
with gender,
Extreme pretentiousness.
unquestioning belief in your identity, your belief, your opinion, without perhaps acknowledging that knowledge lies everywhere.
What is, in your opinion, how do you define justice in today's complex world?
It's such a big word. What worries me is that it seems to be going out of fashion. What is the Hindi saying? Jiski lathi uski bhains. I think, might is right. And that's what we are seeing today. And I am amazed at how little resistance there is to it.
And there is more acceptance.
There's more acceptance of one's own powerlessness and one's own helplessness.
Right.
And I am not immune from that.
What would be your definition of power?
You can have good power. You can have the power that Mr. Mandela had, or who Mr. Gandhi had, and or even today the Dalai Lama could have, with the kind of religious devotion that comes with that.
Carries.
But it's how you use that,
And
for whom you use
Yeah,
that,
for what? Yeah.
what you do with it, and the feeling that these people in power, not today necessarily, but people in power seem to forget that they are mortal.
Right.
There's something to leave for history.
Yes.
And that they will be judged.
Right.
Not by God Almighty, but what you leave behind.
What the legacy you leave behind of inspiration or of...
Honestly, I don't feel empowered enough to do that judging. People with vaunting ambition can have large dreams and larger dreams, and you should.
Yeah, why not?
But it depends on your capacity.
It's wonderful catching. It's getting more interesting. The Maja as the human rights lawyer and Maja as Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw's daughter. We'll come on to that. But can we talk about some interesting cases, because we'll leave some impression on the children, or anything you'd like to talk about?
Sure. I was not a successful litigating lawyer.
Yeah.
I was far more successful financially as a transactional lawyer.
Right.
But when I actually got into working as the head of my own NGO,
Right.
I think that I was much more comfortable and had found the place that I wanted to be. So I was at the transect of governance and making rights reality.
Right.
So I used to work on Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, and it was an international NGO, and it had been brought to India with the agreement of the government.
The one you served for 20 years.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And it was brought to India by Mr. George Verghese, who used to be the head of the Indian Express and many other things, and Mr. Soli Sorabji, who was an advocate
general,
of... Not only that, but he was also a great advocate of freedom of speech. Yes. And I had the luck also, as I said, of being in very good company.
So that's what is one strong message probably for the students. So be in good company. In between, can we have a question from them to you directly?
Of course.
Anybody?
I want to know if there was some point in your life where you felt like in a dark hole or dark pit that I couldn't do this. मुझसे नहीं हो रहा है ये. Like being in a law school, we know that there's stress. We have to deal with stress.
See, the stress of an exam is just a stress. Yeah, it's just a stress. You just have to get over it. I mean, if you can't get over your exams, you're not going to get over your life, right? Dark hole, I could never gel with what was the notion of justice that you talked about. Actually getting a dispute sorted or getting justice for my client with the process of court.
So you agree that any field, I would say, but since this is a little law specific, students need to keep a lot of patience.
There are other things that I feel I can say we as a collective of good people and civil liberties people and activists did get a success was with the right to information law.
Right.
There was a movement for the right to information law.
Absolutely.
And myself and my colleagues worked very hard on making that happen.
Yes.
And so when it did happen, it was a collective joy. And the other thing that we did after the right to information law was passed was because I worked with an international NGO, I took that same idea to Ghana, to Kenya, to Tanzania, to East Africa. And in fact, Ghana passed a right to information law.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
And there was a kind of almost a global movement, but again with global colleagues. And that's why I truly believe in global solidarity for making things happen. But that too now is under challenge.
Maja, Sam Manekshaw's daughter, personality, we can't sum it up in a very short time or with any number of words. It's a legacy, it's an inspiration, I would say it's an institution. What memories, would you like to share today with us? Some of them, I'd like to point out is you have grown up hands-on with a dad who was so wonderful. You had a sister.
Well, people always ask me about my father.
Yeah.
But the first thing I can say about him is, I liked him.
Oh.
And as we grew up, I respected him much, much more.
Absolutely.
And not as a child who was silly and, ye dad hai, to respect karna hai. Because of his qualities.
Right.
I can't say he was a modern dad in the sense of doing everything with us and all of that.
Your dad hardly, was at home because of his work commitments and the responsibility he carried on his shoulders. And yet you have so much exalted respect for him.
As DMO, when we were just 5, 6, 7, my sister must have been about 10, we were living in Delhi. And we had this house, in those days it was called number 1 King George's Avenue. We had this very pleasant house with a little garden outside. And you can imagine how different Delhi was, because in the nights when we used to sleep outside in the summer, you used to get a fox in the garden.
Yeah.
And he would come home or he would go very early in the morning, many days. But then many days he was at home. But he was full of fun and full of humor and full of energy to do everything. We would go shooting in the fields outside Delhi. We'd take the car, take a couple of friends, 2 guns, and in the winter time, they would shoot grouse and partridge, bater, those things. And what could you do with a child? So what we used to do is go out. The men would go off shooting, and even my mother would go off shooting, and they'd leave me in the village on a cart with some villager. Yeah, with some villager. And in those days, you didn't feel the fear of anything.
Yeah.
So when they came back in the evening, I'd had my parathas and dal and this, that, and the other.
You're
quite
well
happy.
taken care of. Yeah.
Well taken care of. He had many hobbies. And once he got into a hobby, he would drive us all crazy with the hobby. My sister had to pose when he decided he wanted to be a portrait photographer. So hours and hours she would pose.
And,
she would have a tripod and lights and this and that. And my mother would say, "What is all this kharcha?" And he would say, no, I'm going to be a photographer. I'm going to be a really good photographer. That went. Then he decided he wanted to do fishing.
Yeah.
That was later on in life.
Yeah.
But in between, in the house,
Farming.
farming and cooking.
Yeah.
When we were in Firozpur, we had this huge house.
Yeah.
The house was not very big, but the plot of land was big.
Yeah.
So what did we have to do? We had to have a farm. So we used to grow saunf, aniseed. And it's wonderful for a child. You have this aniseed and you pick it.
And to learn the process.
And you learn the whole process.
Yeah.
And cotton.
Yeah, I read that cotton,
Cotton,
and, potatoes, and tomatoes.
And a steady fight with the gardener. The gardener's name was a Sikh gentleman whose name was Kartar Singh. And after 20 minutes of having father in the field, he would say, "Tusi jao." And he would go, and then we would collect everything. And so the thing about him was, he was interested in everything.
So he was in the present.
Absolutely.
A very curious child.
Our Hindi master used to come. And he would engage the Hindi master from the gate to the time when he was sitting down with my sister. And he was not a particularly good Hindi master. In fact, he was a pretty damn bad Hindi master. And Sam would stand at the door, and then when he left, he would make fun of him and tease my sister. "What did you learn today? Can you do pulling and streeling? Are you pulling the string?" And he would go on like that, so that you could not have any respect for the master. We had an amazingly egalitarian household.
Yeah.
We had a Muslim Khansama. We had a Dogri second in command. We had a Christian Aya. We had Sikh and Gorkha guards. And we had a Pakka Pandit Brahmin driver. Who had the driver, the guards, and the the soldiers, the Sikhs and the Gorkhas, they were all army. And they were what was normally given. We just had 3 servants for ourselves. And that was mostly because I was a small child, and therefore we had to have some woman in the house. That was the main reason why. But as a result, we all spoke Punjabi, we all spoke Gorkhali. My mother not so much. My sister also not so much. But certainly we all spoke Hindi. And I also spoke Konkani because the person who looked after me was from Goa. And in the evening, father and mother were always playing tennis or going to the mess or all of those things. And the staff would sit around in a circle. In those days, there was that tradition of hookah. So the hookah would go around, and I, as a 5-7-year-old, 5-year-old, would be in somebody's lap. passed around from this one to that one. Sufi.
So very holistic and
Very-
balanced upbringing and everything.
But also you learned about discrimination.
Yes.
I very much remember that. I remember that
When
the
the
person
teacher
who
was,
used
yeah.
to clean the toilets
Yeah,
was never within the inner circle.
right.
And I remembered that very well. And I remember asking my mother about it. And her explaining that this was not right, but this was something that she could do nothing about.
That's brilliant. I think I'm very glad that you openly expressed that. But then, what lessons did you learn from your father that you still, guide the society and guided you, and you want to guide the future generation?
You know, everybody sees him as a tremendously big personality.
Yeah, apart from the public figure, what
Yeah.
a daughter knows.
But what we saw was a man whose humor was always self-deprecatory.
Oh,
He would tease us and all that, but he was ready to be teased in turn,
yeah.
and would have nothing to say in his own defense. There were 3 women in the house, so he really didn't have much to say in his defense, I assure you.
I think there are a lot of women here also.
And so the other thing I think I learned from him was he trusted people. He trusted people a great deal.
Oh, that's
And
very tough.
until he saw someone really harm him, he didn't believe that people were wrong or bad or were to be talked down to.
More pureness, I think would say there was a
And
tremendous.
I also feel the same way. I don't feel that I need to distrust anybody.
Yeah.
मार खा
beautiful.
जाते हैं लेकिन तब भी क्या करें?
क्या
So
करें,
that's
आदत
part
है.
of it. He had what I don't have, which is an amazing memory.
And what is that?
He just didn't forget people. We were at the Oberoi, and we were
Delhi.
walking Delhi,
Yeah.
and the doorman, is very handsome, tall Sikh gentleman with a big safa,
Yeah.
and he said, "Namaste, Sahab, aap hame yaad nahi karenge." He said, "Yaad nahi karenge," and he gave him his number. He had worked in the same unit, and he gave him his number and said, "I remember your name and your number." And I said, "Father,
Wow.
you just bluffed that." He said, "How can I bluff it? I know his number." Maybe it was just chance, but he had that ability to connect.
Yeah. A very natural networker,
Networker seems to sound a bit deliberate. It wasn't. It was
Natural ability.
It was an ability to be with someone.
Human.
He was amazing with younger people,
Yeah.
and he was amazing with women.
We saw in that movie, so it's excellent. So do you think he also, as you said, I could get it now, he wanted to be a center of attraction, right?
It was almost automatically so. When we were all sitting around in our house, he had 2 sisters, 3 brothers, their husbands and wives, us as children, and us as children we were not brought up to be silent in front of our elders and all that. We were brought up to say whatever we wanted,
Express,
whenever
yeah.
we wanted and all that.
Yeah.
And yet he would sit at a table somewhere obscure in the drawing room, and he'd make a joke and everybody would turn and say, "What did you say?" And he would make a joke and the whole thing would be about talking to him. He just was lucky to be a presence that people liked being around.
Yeah, absolutely. That is
He
what
didn't
is-
have to work at it.
Yeah, absolutely. That connect, which was very natural.
Sam knew nothing about artistic things, about taste, color. He had a lovely music collection. He was absolutely tone deaf.
Right.
But he would put on music for my mother in the morning.
The
She would say,
LPs and all.
yes.
Yeah.
She would say, "I want to listen to jazz." He would put it on. "I want to listen to classical music." She would put it on. He would put it on. But he loved having the collection, and he liked listening also, but he didn't have any particular capability in that area.
Right.
And
Interesting.
if you teased him about it, he would say, "But I'm only a doctor's son from Amritsar." So I'd often tell him, Father, don't tell me. I am the daughter of a field marshal. You are the daughter of somebody in Amritsar.
Somebody. So you used to call him Sam?
Yes, until he was much older.
Yeah.
Then I started to call him Father.
So when he grew older, was he like a baby?
No,
He was still Sam
he
Bahadur?
was still Sam.
What are your impressions about the movie which was made on him?
Vicky did a very good job.
Excellent.
And of his mannerisms, etc. But it was only about one part of his life. He was much more multifaceted than that. And we as a family were much more multifaceted. And they chose not to show that at all.
Right. But
You
you
know,
enjoyed
it's centered around Bangladesh.
Bangladesh. But you enjoyed as a family that.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Brilliant. I think we can go on, and but we can take one last question.
After hearing a lot about your father as well as your mother, both played a crucial role in your whole personality development. What are you right now is because of them only. The mentality which you have to fight for the human justice, is it because of them or is it because of a certain situation which has or had happened to you in the past?
Darling, we are all the creatures of our parents and our community and our families, right? It was the larger family who also had very liberal values, right? I don't want to make us out to be some kind of pantheon of gods. Not at all. We were just an ordinary family in a lucky position with a lot of goodness and kindness around us. And so we became those people. A person who comes from a family like mine didn't have to do anything. I could have got married to somebody, which I did, who looked after me, which he did, and at the same time choose to do absolutely nothing. I could have done that. But you have a proclivity to do something, so you do that thing.
Yeah.
Everything comes from being ordinary, but everything also can be extraordinary
Brilliant.
if you make it so.
So, was it tough for you two girls to help your mom and to keep the admirers of your dad, the female admirers, away?
My mum and I and my sister, but particularly my mum, could keep my father grounded. Because when you have that kind of
A personality,
admiration,
Yeah, admiration.
which comes with the position, you have a strong personality, you have a knowledge of yourself, etc. But when 1,000 people are telling you that you are
This and that.
this and that, and
Yeah.
Sam had a very good expression about it, which I cannot say on camera. But if people are telling you that, you start to believe it.
Yeah.
And that's the time when you have a solid family and a solid wife who says, stop.
Yeah.
That's for outside, not here.
Were you ever able to, being so close to him, intercept some of his worries?
Yes.
What was he worried about?
He never talked about secret professional things, but during a time of stress or anything like that, my one regret was that during the Bangladesh thing, I was in England. My sister was in Delhi and I was in England with my husband. And my great regret was never going through that period with him.
Okay, that was there.
Yeah. And when he grew older and after my mother died, he was lonely. And we were all in the middle of our lives. So we would go up and be with him and he would come down and be with us. And he was still actively on the boards of many companies, so he traveled a lot. But at that time, the love and affection that one has with a parent had turned into a empathy for a companion.
Oh, beautiful.
You know, that is the kind of thing that happens.
More human
Yes.
than any boundaries to that relation. It was lovely meeting you. What an honor.
Thank you so much. It's an honor for me. I'm always amazed that people want to hear all this.
So it's such an honor meeting you.
Thank you
catching
so much.
up, and what a pleasure. And we look forward to your next visit.
Thank you.
and for a larger collective good.
Okay.